The tactic that we are going to look at today that the enemy uses the most to keep us stuck in our lives is the predecessor of jealousy. It's the predecessor of pride, of self-pity. What is it? Life comparisons. We're going to talk about how the enemy uses life comparisons to keep us stuck in our lives. So stay tuned. Welcome to my channel. I'm so glad that you are here. If you are here for the first time, or if you're a regular class attender, I am so glad that you are here. And we are in the middle of a series entitled Stuck. And in this series, we are looking at tactics that the enemy uses with us to keep us stuck in our lives. And the tactic of life comparisons was a tactic that the enemy used with people that lived during the Bible times. Specifically, we're going to look at how the children of Israel struggled with life comparisons in their own lives. And we can see that in 1 Samuel chapter 8. 1 Samuel chapter 8. And in this chapter, we see how the children of Israel are already battling with life comparisons in their lives. They are fighting the enemy, and when they go out to battle, they see that they're different than the enemy. The enemy has a king ruling over them. The children of Israel during this time were not ruled by a king. They were ruled by judges. And they had judges throughout the 12 tribes of Israel. And so when there was a problem amongst the Israelites, they would go to the judge, and the judge would settle the matter. And so when they would go out on the battlefield, they saw other people. They saw the enemy that they were battling, and they saw that they were different. They didn't have a king. So the enemy would be out on the battlefield, and this king was arrayed in gold, jewels, lots of chariots. It was all of this splendor. And the Israelites were thinking, we want that. Why don't we have that? We want that. And so they prayed, and they went to Samuel. Samuel was the prophet during this time. And they told Samuel that we want a king. They wanted to be like everybody else. They wanted a king. And God did give them a king. God wanted them to be content with the way matters were being settled, with the judges in place, with their governing body. And the children of Israel didn't want that. They wanted to be like the other people. And so God gave them a king. The first king that God gave them was King Saul. It only took 2 years for King Saul to turn bad, and for him to start making bad choices. And the Israelites soon saw that with this king in place, King Saul, they were now having battles within themselves, within the Israelites. So they were not only fighting battles out there with their enemies, but they were fighting battles amongst themselves, because now they had a king who was not ruling in a godly manner. In fact, God fired him from his position, okay, and he was supposed to turn over his power to David, which was God's next anointed king of Israel. But King Saul didn't do that. He didn't turn over his power, the kingship, to David. In fact, he tried to kill David. And this created a lot of havoc within the children of Israel. And it made their life very tumultuous, full of misery, chaotic. And so what can we learn from this as we're reading the story of how the children of Israel wanted to be like other people? We can learn two things from this. The first thing is that we can learn is to embrace our uniqueness. You know, the children of Israel were different, and they saw that difference when they were out in battle, battling their enemies, right? They saw they were different. But instead of looking at how we're different and seeing that that's a bad thing, look at it from a creative standpoint. Look at it as a blessing, not a curse, but a blessing. And the children of Israel did not see that as a blessing. They saw that as a curse. The second thing that we can learn from this story is that not only can we fight life comparisons by embracing our uniqueness, embracing that it's a blessing, but we can also fight life comparisons by replacing it with what I call vertical comparison. So what do I mean by vertical comparison? We're not supposed to be comparing ourselves with others. We're supposed to be comparing ourselves with Jesus. Vertical comparison. So we're Christians, and when you look at the word Christian, you see the word Christ. We're supposed to be Christ followers. So when we're Christ followers, we are growing in this spiritual thinking mind that we read a lot about in the Bible. And how can we know if we're growing or not? How can we allow that to be preeminent in our mind, the vertical comparison and not the life comparison? Well, there's several things that you can do. One thing you can do is to write goals for yourself. You can, in January, everybody's talking about their New Year's resolutions, and New Year's resolutions are the same thing as goals, and you can write goals for yourself for that new year. And your goals need to be centered around this spiritual thinking mind, how we can keep growing into a deeper relationship with Christ, how we can become more like Him. And there are several great books out there that teach you how to write a goal, how to keep yourself accountable throughout the year, and to create a habit with it. And this is a great way, a great measuring tool to see how you've grown throughout the year, and really to compare yourself with how you were last year. And as we're growing, Christians, we don't need to be the same person that we were last year, a year ago, right? We're supposed to be a different person, a better person, different in a good way. We're supposed to be changing lifelong habits, right? Habits that we've had that are not part of being in the spiritual thinking mind. And goals are a great way to keep us accountable, to keep us on track with what we are doing in our life. And It's a great way for us to stay accountable all year long. So today, why don't we start writing goals for ourselves if we don't already? And, it's more than memorizing scripture is good, but actually applying what you've memorized in your life, right? We're changing habits. We are fighting these tactics that the enemy uses with us on a daily basis. And what we're reading in Scripture, we're applying in our lives. And so the two things that we've learned from fighting this tactic of life comparisons is to embrace our uniqueness and to replace life comparisons with a vertical comparison. That is my spiritual food for you to munch on the rest of the week. I can't wait to see you next week.